Hi everyone and welcome back to another video. This is probably the strangest intro that I will ever do, but welcome to the underside of my desk and to show you my pedal board that's on the floor here. Now I've had quite a few requests of how I've been getting the tones for my videos recently, and so I just wanted to show you can use traditional pedal board with amp sims and it works brilliantly. That's what I've been using. To start with, my guitar comes in over on this side, this orange cable here that goes into this white pedal. It gets routed through all these different pedals and eventually it comes back out on this orange one, which leads back up to my interface. So the only optional extra that I've got here is this board down here, which is a Midi controller, and that is what allows me to control all of my amps through a program called GigPerformer, which I'll get into a little bit later. But for now, let me show you my interface and how it's connected through there. So the orange cable then comes up into, this is actually the second input on my Audient ID4 interface. That goes into the DI on the interface. Yours might have an instrument on there or a line in or something like that. This also on the back has an XLR and also another line in as well, so you could have two instruments plugged into this or a microphone as well. All the gear that I'm using, I'll leave a link in the description down below. That's kind of everything wired up and plugged in. And now let's hop over into the computer and I'll show you how everything's hooked up and how I get my sounds. So it's important to say before we get going in any of this that I'm not sponsored by any of these companies that I might mention within this video. They haven't paid me to talk about their software or anything. These are things that I've just stumbled across by myself when trying to build this rig initially. So here we are in GigPerformer now. You can see that on the screen here. I've loaded everything up. Now the cool thing about GigPerformer is you can load in any plugins that you might have on your machine. So for me, as you can see over here, these are my rack spaces. So I have one for a clean sound, one for an overdrive, and then I'll show you how I created the made for TV movie sounds that I covered a few weeks ago. Now let's start with this. So this is my audio interface up here where the audio is coming in from, which is on the desk here. That is coming out of channel 2, that's where my DI is plugged into, and I'm immediately going into input 1 of the Archetype Petrucci plugin from Neural DSP. Now this is going into the clean amp here, and then you can also see that I've got this other plugin set up here, which is just a little EQ essentially. So with all of that set up, you can use this just like you would your normal amplifier. So I like to think of my interface as the input for the amplifier, and then you can play around with gain, bass, middle, treble, presence, master, volume, everything that you usually would on your amplifier. Now the cool thing about this is I'm then sending this out to, this is a virtual driver, and that is going into my DAW, and as you can see that's recording here. So if I play something, you can see this is my guitar signal up here that is coming in. Now usually this would be your interface again, and I've got my headphones that you usually see me play with, that's set up and connected into that, so that's what I'm listening through usually. But for this, I don't have to wear the headphones, I've got everything coming out of my computer speakers so that I can hear what I'm doing. And then this is so that I can record it so you guys can hear what I'm doing. So with this stuff set up, I've also got my MIDI controller on the floor, and you see when I click a button, you see it's gone straight over to the overdrive patch. And here's made for TV movie. And then a variation of that. And back to clean again. So you can hear how they all sound different. What I love about GigPerformer, or what I've found with GigPerformer, I tried many different things, and the MIDI switching has quite a lot of latency on other stuff, so you get a slight delay before your sound comes in, which is driving me nuts. Whereas with GigPerformer, watch this. It's instant, which is great. You know, coming from amplifiers and stepping on pedals and stuff where it's instantaneous, you know, I needed that in this kind of setup as well when I'm practicing and playing, otherwise it drives me mad. So this does all of that, which is really cool. So with all of this set up, I can now turn on my pedals like I normally would. So if I turn on my delay and some reverb, and I'm going to give away some songs that I'm working on here, but we could play something like this. And you can hear there that the pedals work with this absolutely perfectly. Using those same pedals, I could go over to my overdrive here and play the chorus of Adolescence. Etc, etc. So you can see how nicely that works as well. So for made for TV movie, I've got a couple of these are called variations. So this takes the same presets, but you can change some parameters. So I've got this set up as 3 and 4 on my board. So the clean sound is like this. And then with the tube screamer. So essentially what that's doing, I'm only using the overdrive from the Archetype Petrucci, which is not on in this instance. And then I'm using the Nembrini Audio DC30, which is basically a Vox AC30 clone, essentially. So that's my main amp sound. And then when I hit number 4, that activates the overdrive here. So you've got that kind of tube screamery kind of sound. So for the intro part, can play all of those parts as clean as I normally would. I can then kick on the big muff as I did. You know, you could kick on other pedals as well then. So for that little solo section. Kind of, that was a bit rough, but you can see how that works. And then for that bridge part where I want the tube screamer to kind of hit the front end of the amp like you would in a pedal, I can kick that on and then play. And then instantly go back to that clean. So there's a ton of things that you can do with this, and I'm probably barely scratching the surface of what this is able to do. So when using these plugins, I think people may get a bit confused with certain stuff. Now, using an all-in-one plugin like the Neural DSP stuff or even the Nembrini Audio stuff, you've got different sections here. So this is your front end of just the amplifier. But there's also a cabinet section, and this is the really important part. So you may have downloaded a plugin that is just the amplifier, and you load it up in however you're using it, in your DAW or a standalone thing or whatever it comes with, and it sounds horrendous. It just sounds tinny and distorted and awful. That will be because you need to pair it with a virtual cabinet. Just like you would a real amplifier. If you had an amp head and you didn't pair it with a speaker cab, you're going to have a bad time. And you can play around with the microphones and get different sounds there. So it's not just EQ on an amp. You know, changing where your mic placement makes a huge difference as well. So you can do all that kind of stuff in here, and you've got different options that come preloaded with some of these plugins. And if you've got your own, these are called impulse responses. If you've got your own IRs, you can load those in here as well. So you can use this as an IR loader. But for the most part, a lot of these things, certainly the ones that I have at the moment, like the Nembrini stuff, it comes with its own impulse responses. So you can change the cabinets, you can change the microphones. See here I've got the 57 set on off axis, so a bit of an angle. You can change how far back they are from the amplifier. You can change the position of them sort of left and right, so closer to the cone will be brighter, further away would be darker. And you can blend these two as well. So the ribbon mic's going to be a bit warmer and have a bit more bass. So you can I've upped that on here to get a bit more warmth through, versus the 57, which would be more mid-rangey and more sort of higher mids, so a bit sharper. And I've mixed that a little bit lower in this instance for the sort of AC30 kind of look. You can mute these, you can change the phase on them, you can solo them. The nice thing about the Nembrini stuff is you have this cleaner, so if it's quite boomy and rumbly, you can dial some of that out. If it's quite harsh and trebly, you can dial some of that out as well, which is basically like how you would use an EQ essentially, so a high pass and a low pass filter to let certain frequencies through. You haven't got to mess around with EQs, you can do that all from this cleaner, as far as I can tell, and it works really well. There is a noise gate on here as well, which I don't use, but you can turn that on if you want to as well. You can change your input gains and output gains from here, and you can still get to the front panel of the amplifier, which is nice as well. So that could be why people are sort of struggling with these plugins, is that if you've got a standalone thing that's just an amplifier and it's not hooked up to any virtual cabinets, it's going to sound awful. So I hope that's been helpful, guys. If you want to know how my pedal board is wired up, I've got a video here that goes through all of that, specifically set up for Incubus songs and how to sound like Mike Einziger. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.